First of all, we're going to look at what is a butt wink or what is a hip wink. Then we're going to look at why it's a problem. And then we're going to look at the 4 ways in which we can prevent it from happening. If you are struggling with lower back pain, please do hit the link below, go through to my How to Overcome Lower Back Pain online or face-to-face consultation and assessment. And what we'll be able to do is get you a rehab plan and get you on the road to recovery. So first of all, what is a butt or hip wink? Well, essentially, it is when we go down into, hip flexion, essentially, but I'm going to use a squat as the example. So it's when we come down into this position, and then when we get to, say, here, it tucks under. So it's only a small movement, but it just tucks under as we get to the bottom of the movement. We don't want this to be happening. This is a problem when it comes to muscle activation, but certainly when it comes to lower back pain, because it's irritating one specific part of the joint. Now, as I mentioned, it's a very subtle movement. So we have to make sure that it is hip tucking and it's not just some trousers or a pair of shorts being pulled around because it gets tight as we go down into this position. So it could just be that it is shorts or trousers that are just tucking around. But what we do have to make sure is that it is the hip winking. And a way that you can do that is just by putting your hand across your back. I've got my little finger on my pelvis, I've got my thumb on my lower back, and the back of my hand in between. And what that allows me to do is as I go down, I can start to feel that tuck under. And if I can feel it happening, then there's a good chance there's going to be a hip wink there. You may have seen it in a mirror. I've got a couple of mirrors here. So as I go down, I get to there and then I can see it. I can see it. I can see it. So you can see it tuck under. So that's what a hip wink is. And why is it a problem? Well, as I've mentioned, it shuts down and sort of deactivates certain muscles, mainly glutes, lower back muscles, so on and so forth. The main problem, well, that is a problem for lower back pain, but the main problem that comes with lower back pain and the hip wink is the S1, L5 segment, because the S1 is a part of the pelvis, L5 is a part of the lumbar spine, and that is where it starts to flex because the hip's tucking under. When it starts to flex, if we're repeating that, it will delaminate the disc. What then will start to happen is the fluid on the inside of the disc will start to migrate its way through the disc. Now again, this doesn't happen just in one hip wink. This is happening over many, 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 many hip winks. So it'll feel fine for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, when we do it one time, it will go. And that's because it's migrated, it's migrated, it's migrated. Then all of a sudden it gets to the edge, it bulges the disc, it irritates the nerve, and it gives you pain. But all of that time where you were doing it leading up is essentially the cause of the problem. So the hip wink is the cause of the problem, or all of the hip winks are the cause of the problem, not just the last hip wink or whatever it was that caused it. So what we have to do is we have to make sure we get rid or prevent this hip wink from happening. And what we're going to do next is talk about 4 ways that we can do that. And the first way is to not squat as low. So as you can see here, I've lifted the weight off the floor. So when I come into this position, I know now that I don't have to go down as far. Now this could be you just don't go down as far. You don't need the step there. You just hold the weight and you just don't go down as far as you did before. Again, you can use a mirror, look at yourself, get your phone, video yourself. Is your hip winking when you do it? So basically, come down into position and up. Now all this time, I know I'm not going to be hip winking because I'm not going as deep into the squat as I once was. So number 1 is to either lift the weight up or not go down as far. But essentially, if you lift the weight up, you won't go down as far. Number 2 is going into either a front squat or a goblet squat. Essentially, these things are the same. It shifts the center of gravity forwards, which allows you to go a little bit deeper into the squat, but also keep the torso upright. So a goblet squat is essentially holding a weight in front of you and then squatting down into this position. Again, what you should notice is as I squat down, my body will stay a little bit more upright when I've got the weight in front of me. What that does, my body's staying upright, it reduces the flexion of the hip ever so slightly. And what that does, that allows me to go down that much further. So number 2, or the second way of preventing the hip wink, is to do a front squat or a goblet squat. Number 3 is to externally rotate at the hips. Now we can do this in any type of squat. Again, we can do it in the goblet squat, or we can do it in the standard squat when we are just using a kettlebell going up and down, or even in the back squat. Now, what is the external rotation doing? It's making the, not the length of your femur any shorter, but what it is doing is it's making the distance from your hip to where your knee is shorter. Because if you can imagine, this is my femur, and let's just say this is 40 centimeters from there to there. If I externally rotate, now if we use from here to here, it's possibly gone to say 38 centimeters. You've just knocked a couple of centimeters off. If we go a little bit further, again, it's that much shorter. So when we externally rotate, again, it allows our center of gravity to stay more underneath us. And when our center of gravity is more underneath us, we can stay more upright, which is then going to prevent the hip wink from happening. So what does that look like when we squat? Well, essentially, all we're looking to do is you may have your toes out ever so slightly. Don't go putting them out here, because then you just deactivate glutes and that causes its own problems. So we either want the feet pointing forward or ever so slightly just pointing outwards. So we go into this position, and then as we drop down, we just push the knees out to the outside of the feet. So as we get down here, we've got the knees out. We try and keep this part of the foot down on the floor. So the foot is flat on the floor, but the knees are out. What we get there is sort of twofold. That distance becomes shorter, so it allows us to go down deeper, but also we get the glutes active, which helps stabilize the pelvis. So number 3 is external rotation at the hip. Number 4 is to improve ankle range of movement, because improving the ankle range of movement does similar to what we've talked about with the goblet squat, the external rotation before. And that is that it keeps our center of gravity back underneath us. So we don't have to counterbalance that by dropping the body forward, increasing the hip hinge, and then causing the hip wink to happen. So what we would do is we want to get the knees forward over the toes, which keeps our body upright. Now, obviously, if we have poor range of movement at the ankle, the goblet squat is going to help that straight away. If we can improve it, we're going to be able to do more back squatting and keeping the body more upright, then preventing the hip wink from happening. So a very simple way of doing that is obviously increasing dorsiflexion, and dorsiflexion is when my knee goes towards my toe. And one very simple exercise for that is just coming into this position and just going forward onto the ankle here, feeling the stretch through here and just allowing that to stretch through. So it's very simple. You don't have to use this one. You can use any type of stretch for the ankles, but it's very much getting forward on the ankle, and then you can just pulse in and out. And again, that will just help start to improve the ankle there. I wouldn't just do that one exercise. I would dedicate a good 15, 20 minutes, possibly half an hour to really getting into the ankles and loosening them off. So to summarize what we've talked about, first of all, what is a hip wink? Where the pelvis tucks under. Why is it a problem? Because it causes the S1, L5 segment to become lax, which can then give you disc problems, one being a disc bulge. So how do we then go about preventing it? Number 1 is either lifting the weight up or not going down as low, or because we've lifted the weight up, we're not going down as low. So basically, don't go down as low. Number 2 is going into a front squat or goblet squat, which is going to keep the body upright, not flex the hip as much, and allow you to go down deeper without the hip tucking under. Number 3, external rotation at the hip, because we're reducing the distance between the pelvis and the knee. As we externally rotate, it goes from the longest distance here to a shorter distance from here to here because the knee's out. And then number 4 is improve range of movement at the ankle, because what that's going to allow us to do is, again, keep the central gravity underneath us, so we're able to get down in there without the pelvis tucking under. If you've enjoyed this content, please do hit the like button below. If you've learned something new, hit the thanks button below. If you've got a comment or a question, please leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to watch more videos like this, please do hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll be sent the next video when it's released.